Coming up here on See You at USC, I'll be speaking with Bart Campolo. He's the humanist chaplain here at USC. I'll ask him what that means and how he got to that position coming up right here on Trojan Vision. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to See You at USC. My name is Cole Sullivan. Thank you for being here tonight. And thank you for being here as well, Bart. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to join you.
So I want to start, and we're going to get into a lot of the things you do here at USC and exactly what this position means, you know, the humanist chaplain here at USC. But first I want to talk a little bit about your journey to that position. You started off, you're born in Philadelphia. Tell me how you got to where you are today.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You know, where I am today is I'm the secular humanist chaplain. You know,
yeah.
And so what that kind of means is that I look after the spiritual lives of all the students on the campus that want to be really great people, want to make the world a better place, want to, you know, make the most of their lives, but don't believe in God, don't believe in any kind of supernaturalism. But that's like when I grew up in Philadelphia, my father is a very well-known Christian evangelist. And I grew up on the campus of a little Christian college called Eastern Baptist College. And I got swept up in a youth group when I was about 15 years old and got converted into evangelical Christianity myself. And so I spent like 30 years as an evangelical Christian minister. So
talk about that, because that's always something that I find really fascinating. What is that first conversion experience like for a lot of people? What was it like for you to kind of enter at age 15 into this youth group and realize this is what you're very passionate about?
Oh, you know, I mean, it's really interesting. Like, what happened was I was a soccer player, and a guy on my soccer team, I was a sophomore on the soccer team, and a senior, befriended me. And he started hanging around with me and doing stuff. And I was just so excited to be included in stuff. And at one point he said, "Hey, will you come along to my youth group with me?" And so I walk into this youth group, and there's like 300 kids there. And there's a rock band, and there's like a light show, and they're playing these huge games, and it was like this huge club of nice people. Do you know what I mean? Like, everybody was really nice. They were like, "Oh, great to meet you. I'm so glad you're here," and you know. And it was funny, like everybody was there from all these different high schools, but like kids from different kind of cliques. Like, there were athletes there were nerds there were like stoners from behind the school there, and like, in this setting, everybody that was there was just loving everybody. Everybody loved everybody. It was just seemed like that. And I mean, they had me at hello. I was just like, I want to be a part of this club, you know? And it didn't take long for me to figure out that they were all Christians and that this was all sort of built around kind of the Christian thing. And I knew that language from my household. I knew that from growing up. So I was like, okay, like,
if this is what it means to be a Christian, if you get to hang out with people who are
exactly
friendly and nice.
And what's funny is when I came in, I didn't believe in God. Like, I had grown up like thinking Christianity is like, that's my parents' thing, it's a cool thing. Like, it wasn't that I was against it, it was just I didn't have any kind of belief. It didn't make sense to me. But in the context of this group, all of a sudden, I wanted it to make sense. So like, I wanted to be part of the group. So I didn't believe in God, but I faked it. You know, you sort of go along to the Bible studies, and they're praying, and so you close your eyes, and like, I went through the motions of Christianity for a long time, for like weeks, months. And then at some point, like, we went on one of these retreats, and I guess the best way to describe it to you is I had a transcendent experience.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, like, you're in a room with 300 people, and it's candlelit, and everybody's swaying to the music and singing, "I love you, Lord," and you feel like, oh wow, something's happening here. Like, you get swept up in the moment, and everybody's saying like, "We love Jesus." Yes, don't we love Jesus? And I'm like, yes, we do. And you feel like something's happening there. And it's funny because now that I'm, you know, the secular, you know, leader at USC, a lot of times people say, other secular friends will say, "Oh, I bet you're embarrassed, like pretending that you heard the voice of God," or like, "You talked about that." And I was like, "Oh no, like, this stuff was real. Like, I heard voices, I felt stuff. Like, those transcendent experiences that religious people tell you about, they're real. Like,
and you experienced it.
I would explain it differently now.
Right.
I would talk about like it was something that was happening in my brain, and I was caught up in the collective effervescence of the group and everything, but it was real. And I think that like people that don't think they're real, like they haven't been to the right rock concert, or they haven't used the right drugs, or they haven't like fallen in love with the right partner. But you have these moments where you feel like I'm connected to other people, like I'm part of something bigger than myself. And I think whatever narrative you're in when that happens, it confirms it. So there I am in this Christian group. I feel this kind of transcendent, and I'm like, God's real.
And that was, how old were you then? Were
I was
you
15
still
years
15?
old, yeah. And so and that was it for me. I mean, when I jumped in, once it got sort of emotionally verified for me, I jumped in with both feet. And so like I was that guy at the school carrying the Bible around, like saying like, do you know Jesus? And and the first thing anybody asked me to do as a Christian was to run a summer camp in an inner city neighborhood. I grew up in Philly, and so this was in a place called Camden, New Jersey, which is like this kind of tough ghetto neighborhood across the river. And I started working with kids in Camden as like one summer as a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
And I had never seen urban poverty before, and it messed with me. And by the end of that summer, I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. I'm gonna fight for inner city kids. I'm gonna work for justice for Jesus. And for the next 30 years, I was like an inner city dude working with children in really poor neighborhoods.
So talk a little bit about that work you did, because it seems like for a lot of it was motivated for you by the religion itself, but it was also, but it had an impact beyond that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing, is that for me, I wanted to be part of this community that loved each other and that reached out and tried to love other people and change lives and fight for justice. Like, I was a nice kid, and this appealed to me. The supernatural stuff, that like we get to go to heaven, and Jesus rose from the dead, and people get healed supernaturally. That stuff wasn't the attraction for me. I know it is for some people. They're like, yeah, man, go to heaven. That's awesome. For me, that was the price of admission. That stuff was really hard for me to believe. And all through my Christian life, I was sort of always trying to renegotiate my theology and sort of dial down the supernaturalism.
So how do you do that in the context of being in a group where a lot of people do feel like this is one of the most important tenets of their religion, that you kind of have this supernatural aspect to it? How do you moderate that as a member of the group?
Well, I think when you're young and new, you sort of go along. But as I got older and became more of a leader type, I became a youth minister, and I worked with young people. And the thing is, like, there's a lot of stuff there to work with in the Bible. And so you can emphasize the miracles, or you can emphasize Jesus teaching, love your neighbor, feed the poor. And I just always was like, over here on the social justice side of things, over here on the way God works in the world is through us as we love each other. And so I was always a community builder. It was the community that changed my life. It was being part of that group. And I was always trying to build groups that gave people a sense of identity and a sense of meaning and purpose, and that, like had a mission. We're going to change the world. And so, you sort of stay away from that. And like, there are some churches where there's more of that woo-woo going on. And then there's some churches where there's much less. And I was always sort of more comfortable over there
on that side. And I know it's a half-hour program, but there's no point in dragging our viewers along
for
that
long.
You're using the past tense here. What changed?
It's funny because I think the shortest way to explain it to you in this half-hour program is that over the course of the next 30 years, I'm working in these inner cities with poor people. And I become like a prominent speaker. I'm a guy who travels around and gives talks at like youth conferences for thousands of young people and big churches and conferences. And if you could hear the tapes of all my talks, you would find that over that time, slowly but surely, my commitment to social justice and to building community and to reaching out to broken people grows and grows. It just kept growing. That stuff made sense to me. That stuff worked for me. And my ability to believe in supernatural forces, the idea that like God intervenes or heals people, the idea that like some people are going to go to hell forever because they have the wrong theology. All that stuff just slowly died the death of 1,000 cuts. and particularly in my neighborhood, it died kind of the death of 1,000 unanswered prayers. You would pray for really, like, I wasn't praying for like, make me rich and famous. I was praying like, help that little girl not be raped by her uncle every week. And you wouldn't get an answer to that prayer. Like, you would pray for like really nice people to be healed of cancer and they would die. You would pray for peace in the world. You would pray for any number of things. Like, and my experience was that sometimes those prayers were answered. They were answered kind of precisely at the same rate they would have been answered if there was no God at all, if it was just random. And so eventually, I got to the place where I was like, I'm not sure about all this stuff. And then I had a bike crash. I was out riding my bicycle, and I went off the road at like 40 miles an hour. I don't remember. I just remember leaving the house and waking up in the hospital. And I had hit a tree with my head. My helmet saved my life. But I was so badly concussed that for like a month, I couldn't think straight. And I didn't know if I would ever think straight again.
Wow.
I cried a lot. I slept a lot.
Yeah.
I was just completely unable to function. And as I slowly got my senses back, when I finally recovered, I remember looking at my wife and saying, I think my identity is in my brain. Like, I don't think I'm a disembodied spirit that like is inhabiting this body. Like, I think I'm right here. I'm like, because you know, you smash my brain into a tree, I change.
Right.
So I think that like when this body and this brain die and break down, I think that's all there is. I remember saying to her, I think this life is all we get. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, I think that too. I mean, we'd been sort of tracking together through this whole thing. She said, I think that too. She said, I think you better get a different job because you can't be a professional Christian anymore since you don't believe in God anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the end of it for me.
And what was that feeling like when you had that realization, when you got to that moment? Was it something like, I've been working up to this point for a long time, trying to avoid it for a long time, and now I'm finally here and
yeah, I mean,
confronting
honestly,
it?
it's funny because, you know, you say like, weren't people shocked? And like, when I came out as a secular humanist, most of the people that know me are like, oh yeah, we knew that. Like we were wondering when you would figure it out. Like it was pretty clear to us that you didn't believe in God anymore. But it was terrifying because that wasn't just my community and my identity and my like sort of belief system. You know, that was my whole world. Like, it was my job.
Right. And you had grown up so much with that as part of your family from the very beginning.
And I know, like, my dad's going to be miserable. Like, people are going to be disappointed. There are all these people, that, you know, like, it's going to change everything in my life. So it was sort of this terrifying thing. And honestly, like, since I left Christianity, I meet lots of Christians, lots of people who are in church, ministers, who don't believe in God either. But they can't, you know, they're like, I need the job. Or they're like,
or the work I'm doing is so important
exactly.
that I want to keep
exactly.
doing it.
Like, I get to help poor people all the time, like at this Salvation Army job. Like, I need to keep this gig because it matters to me. Or my wife is a Christian, or my husband is a Christian. Like, I don't want to let everybody down. Like, we go to church every Sunday. I love church. I love the music. I love the community.
And the
like,
ritual that comes with it.
I don't want to lose all that. And so there are a lot of people that kind of, they go through the motions, even though at the core the narrative doesn't really work for them.
And we're coming up on our first commercial break.
Okay.
And I want to ask you when we come back to talk a little bit more about exactly what secular humanism is. That'll be coming up right after this quick commercial break. You're watching See You at USC.
The year was 1938, and the U.S. sat on the brink of another world war. The American people looked for diversion from the trials and tribulations of a new century and its new problems. In 1940, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt authorized the release of an entirely new form of entertainment.
Today, a hope of many years standing is in large part fulfilled.
It was called the Trojan Visual and Auditory Mimeograph Device, or Trojan Vision for short. As bombs fell and war was waged, society tuned to 8.1 for relief. Throughout American history, Trojan Vision has shown us the moments of America's triumphs, spreading the finest programming throughout Greater Los Angeles and worldwide online. Watch Trojan Vision and see history being made.
Welcome back to See You at USC. Thanks for sticking around with us. We were talking before the break about your personal kind of conversion, if you will, to the secular humanism. And during the break, one of the things you were talking about is it was easier relatively within your family than it is for some students who kind of follow the same process you do. How do you help students who are going through the same thing that you went through and having a more difficult time of it?
You know, I mean, it's interesting because when I left the faith, you know, when my wife and I are having that moment, we're like, what do we do now? And she's sort of like, well, do you still believe in community? Do you still want to help poor people? I mean, do you still love me? Do you want to stay married? Like, she's sort of like, this changes that. Like, what does this change? And of course, the answer was, it doesn't change anything. Like, I would have told you before that I was doing all that stuff for the love of God. But the truth is that it was because I cared about that stuff that I was so attracted to that community in the first place. And so the real question was, I was like, oh man, I'm a minister who doesn't believe in God. What do you do? And the answer is like, the more I talked to other people, the more I found that there were lots of people out there who don't believe in God. Either they don't any longer or they never did. But they wish they could be part of a church. They like, that looks like fun to like get together with all these good people to sing songs about good stuff, to go and help other people, to support each other, and to really get together once a week and really focus on how do we grow into better people. Especially the ex-Christians, they're like, man, I miss that community. And so many of them would say to me, man, you should build a church for people who don't believe in God. You should, like, you know how to run that kind of stuff. So like,
right, you've done it for so long. Do it here.
And ultimately, like when Dean Sony, the Dean of Religious Life here, invited me to come here and be the humanist chaplain, that was the gig. It was like, what would it look like to build a community, a student community in this case, of people that would say like, we're not going to get together to talk about like why we don't believe in God. Like that's a dull conversation.
Right.
The question is, how do you make the most of this life? And what does it mean to cultivate more loving relationships? What does it mean to pursue social justice in a secular way? What does it mean to cultivate a sense of gratitude and wonder just for the privilege of being conscious and alive? Now, this is all a roundabout way of answering your question.
Right.
Because that community here has grown a lot. And what I find is that there are a lot of students that are like, oh my gosh, that's what I've been looking for. I really want to be part of something like that, but I don't believe. Like, or I've been in church all these years and it's never fit me, but like this I could do. You know, and they'll often say like, your community sounds great. What do I have to believe to get in? You're like, you don't have to believe in anything that you don't have evidence for. Like, don't worry about it. But when those students do enter in, a lot of times it's really painful for them with their families, especially if they come from really hardcore Muslim families or Christian families or any kind of like very traditional religious family, especially the evangelical Christians, because their parents, a lot of times, unlike my parents, are worried that their kid, if they renounce Jesus, is going to go to hell. And that's a really scary doctrine.
So is that, you know, that to be a secular humanist, there are a lot of ways to participate in this kinds of communities, right? To do this kind of outreach to the poor. To be a secular humanist, I guess what we're trying to get at is how would you define that?
You know, I mean, it's not a perfect word. Like, we don't have a cool name. You know, it's funny, like some people are like, are you an atheist? And I'm like, are you agnostic? Are you, free thinker? I'm like,
maybe we should call it Bartism.
Oh gosh, please don't do that. Don't. Some people think it's already culty enough. Secular simply means that there's no supernaturalism involved. like that we think that this life, that this world is all there is. Kind of like the narrative of science, you know. Humanist is just a way of communicating that it's not just that we don't believe in God, or that we, you know, it's that we're committed to a set of values. It's that we're committed to this idea on a basis of reason, sort of going like, who is it that dies the happiest? Is it the people that are the richest? Is it the people that have the most power? Is it the people who are the most famous? Every study, every scientific study, every data set that you're going to look at is going to tell you, no, the people that sort of register the highest degree of satisfaction with their lives are those that have cultivated a handful of really close, loving relationships, are those that have done work that they genuinely believe has made life better for other people, and are those that have cultivated a sense of gratitude and sort of wonder, like they're sort of like, oh my gosh, like I don't know how this hand works, but like it's electricity and it's evolved and it's amazing, like the brain and the hand, like people that sort of study science for the wonder of it all. Now, so being a secular humanist basically means that you sort of say, hey, if those are if that's the way that people end their lives the best, if that's not only the best for them, but that's also the best for the species. If like I love life so much and I want to see it go forward, what's the best strategy for that? And you're like, it's kind of like cultivating groups of people that love each other and that resolve conflict non-violently and that, you know, that cultivate a sense of wonder and that work for justice together. And so you're like, okay, let's do that. Let's have meetings where we bring in speakers, not to teach us what the Bible says about life, but to sort of go like, hey, there's this new study in psychology that says that when people move rhythmically together, it ends up fostering a sense of brotherhood and connection between them. And you go like, we can use that. Let's play some drums and dance and see if that actually does make us feel more connected. And you go like, wait, you're just gonna like, anything you can pick up from science, anything you can pick up from the outside world that you can use to build better relationships, we're like, oh yeah, we'll do that. And you go like, and are you going to bring in people from the Black Student Assembly to talk to you about how to be better allies with minority groups on campus? You go like, oh yeah, because like that would be part of like working for social justice, and we'll have better lives if we do that, and humanity will be better if we do that. And so it's just a group of people that are aggressively, proactively, enthusiastically saying, I want to make the most of my life. And you know, like you probably have great values, Cole. You look like a nice guy.
Well, that's a question I want to ask you, actually. We were talking about values in the preparation for this.
Right.
And you know, for a lot of religions, there's text, right? You have the Bible, you have the Quran, you have texts that you root your values in. But without a text, how do you kind of root those values? Is there something that you turn to, a core tenet of those values?
It's really interesting. Like, if you think anthropologically, in every culture, they come up with a religion, and they come up with a text. So the question is, you go like, but they base their morality on the text. But what morality caused them to make the text? Like what I'm going to tell you is that the religious people, you know, like the supernaturalists will say, that morality comes out of revelation. It's rooted in the text. It's rooted in God.
Right. It's like the chicken and the egg. For them, morality comes from the text.
And what I'm going to tell you is that whenever you have social animals living together, hunter-gatherer tribes, elephants, bonobos, a code will emerge that enables them, like, they'll share. They'll be like, we can play and we can nip at each other, but we don't bite each other, we don't tear each other up, because like it's us against the outside world. There's codes of all kinds of things, forgiveness, grieving of the dead. All these things emerge, and so what happens is morality emerges between people as we go like, there's a set of behaviors that work not just for me, but for us. And those emerge as like the values of the tribe, as the code of the tribe. And eventually they get codified into a text. And so what I'm going to tell you is like, morality isn't handed down from above. It emerges in relationship. And it changes depending on the circumstances that you're in. And so the struggle to figure out what's right and what's wrong, that's one of life's ultimate questions. And you said, like, have you answered it? And I go, like, I'm working on it. I'll be working on it for the rest of my life. We're all working on it.
And so, how do you work on that? Is it trial and error?
Well, it's funny. One of the things I was saying is like, you seem like a nice guy. Are you a nice guy?
I try.
You seem like a nice guy. And you probably have some really good values. You're like, I should exercise, and I should volunteer, and I should be kind to people, and I should try to be a peacemaker and all that stuff. I have a lot of good values too, but what I find is it's really hard to live up to my values alone. That there are times when like, I know I ought to do A, but I do B. But like whether it's working out or overcoming an addiction or something, what we find is that when we gather together and when we reinforce each other's values, when we support each other, like if you join a gym, you're way more likely.
Or if you have a running buddy.
Right, you're on a team. Right, exactly. Or if you like juggling and you join the juggling club, some days you'll be like, I don't really feel like practicing. You're like, but Joe's here. He wants. Oh yeah, all right. And so you're going to be a better juggler if you're with a group of people that reinforce that value. So how do you figure out what's right and wrong? You gather together with a group of people and you say, listen, we all want to be good people here. Let's get together once a week and talk about it. Let's support each other. Let's hold each other accountable. Like you said you wanted to work on this, like let's work on it. And let's encourage each other. And it turns out that if people sing songs about their values, like if unions sing songs about their values, those values get amplified. Let's make up some songs about our values. Not because we're singing to God, we're singing to each other.
And brings people together.
So
for people who are watching this and who are really interested on campus, students who want to learn more, how do they do that?
Okay, well there's a few things. Like I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
There is the Secular Student Fellowship. They meet on Monday nights at 7 p.m. at the University Religious Center.
Okay.
And like those meetings are those kind of like gatherings, and there's like 20 to 30 really wonderful people there, and it grows all the time. Every other Sunday night, my wife and I come down to USC and we cook a huge home-cooked meal, and we invite all the people we know that are sort of interested in this kind of stuff. And there's like 40 or so people that come. Actually, one of the crew on your show came to dinner last Sunday, and so if they wanted to get on that list, they would email me and ask. And
What's the best email to reach you at?
The best way to find me is to go to my website, which is bartcampolo.org. And not only can you find you can just send me an email there and find out cool pictures of me and me looking handsome. But my podcast is there. I have this podcast called Humanize Me, where every week we have a conversation about making the most of our lives and about pursuing these kind of values. And so the podcast is a lot of fun too.
And it's a great way for people to learn more about these kinds of values and also more how to get involved.
I sense we're coming to the end of our time together.
We are coming on the end of our time together. Thank you so much for being here. We
Thank
really
you so much
appreciate
for
it.
having me. This was really
Of course,
fun.
it's a really fascinating discussion.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. And thank you for watching us here on CU at USC. We'll see you next time. Good night.
You're watching Trojan Vision. For more of your favorite shows, check us out at trojanvision.com and like us on Facebook.